Our speaker today is Jackie Waldman. Jackie's going to be joining us here in the hot seat. Speaking on the topic, War, Love, and Survival in Ukraine. Despite all the stuff that we see happening around us that can be incredibly distracting and concerning, Jackie will focus on an individual story. Jackie has been involved with this congregation since before she moved here. During COVID, she Zoomed our services from Massachusetts. Since she's been in Columbus, 4 years now, she's been in service to this fellowship. She's been a greeter, she's on our board, she sings with the choir at services, she's training to be a service leader, and she's presented programs before. She's also active in the women's group here and the book club. In addition, she continues to attend weekly services at Temple Israel. She's on the board of the Winton Neighborhood Network, and for the past year, she was a weekly volunteer of the network. She's part of Columbus Indivisible. She also has a part-time job seeing doctors, she says. She contributed this point. How does she manage to do all that? She says, frequent napping with her cat. Jackie Waldman.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it. And I really want to thank those who told me not to break a leg. So I did a little research, very little, but I did find that in 1994, the United States, UK, Russia, and Ukraine signed something called the Budapest Memorandum. It meant that Ukraine acceded to the non-proliferation treatment as a non-nuclear weapon state. And what it got, supposedly, was security assurances against the threat or use of force against Ukraine's territory or political independence. In 2014, after some political unrest in Ukraine and the departure of the president, Russia invaded Crimea. And what they said was the security assurances were given to the legitimate government, but not to the forces that came to power following the coup d'etat. In 2019, Zelensky was elected president, and I do have to tell you that one of the reasons that I am so in awe of him is in that state, which is mostly Christian, he's Jewish. And so I started reading this blog. I'm not sure how I found it or how it found me, but the first post that I saw, and I'm going to go through a number of them, was 2/24/23, exactly 1 year after the war started. My name is Viktor. In short, I'm a Ukrainian citizen of 35 years old, internally displaced and alone since my family sought refuge abroad. I started to write a blog about my impressions about the current situation, a project that made me increasingly gratified by the opportunity to connect my deepest emotions with wonderful people around the world. I realized that my mission is to write about feelings. I always had the impression the world is full of detailed news and it's useless to waste people's time by counting missiles. Media outlets don't have a direct interest on the sentiment of the average people that are living, breathing, and hearing the war on the ground. Maybe I'm too emotional at times, but the purpose is precisely to develop a filterless connection to my soul by handling words. However, being a victim of this terrible situation does not make me a victim personally. Despite all the constraints, I'm in the best of my health with my spirits of courage, my determination, and my cognitive skills to fight for my country and to share some notes here and there, living the hell, but with heads up, knowing that it's necessary to live the dream someday. I'm going to take some deep breaths along the way. What's happening here, it isn't news. You, my friend, you don't need another person reporting the war to you. You have the best journalists in the world bringing the news about Ukraine with incredible mastery just a click away from your screen. You probably get the headlines before I do. Power cuts and damaged cell towers often make us the last ones to know our own news. You see the analysis, the satellite images, the maps, you're informed, you're paying attention, but none of that tells you what it feels like. None of that tells you what this war does to a spirit, excuse me, to the sound people make when they're pretending not to be afraid, to the silence in the dark stairwells when everyone is listening for something that might never come, to the way a mother looks at her child when the sirens start again, to the way you try to memorize someone's face just in case it's the last time. That's why I gave up the idea of being objective or composed or balanced, because I'm not outside the story. I'm inside it, inside the ache, the silence, the question that keeps waking me up so many nights: how much more are we expected to lose? It's strange to say, but in some way, I am the story. The story I forget I'm living because I have a life to hold on to, a family to protect, a country to fight for, a reason to stay whole. Thank you. Okay. May 3rd, 2025. I've been thinking about it more than I should. What if we surrender? What if we give up the fight? What if Ukraine stops resisting? Not as a strategy, not as a debate. I mean, really, lay it down. Give them what they want. Let it end. No words, no message, just silence. Not because we believe we should, but because I just want to live again. I need a breath. I need to walk outside and feel like the world isn't collapsing. I need to stop watching people I love disappear. I need my country to have a day without grief. And yes, part of me thought, what if I disappear too? Not from life, but from this war, from this country, from this journal, from this role. No final post, no goodbye, just stop. Some days it feels like peace. Too easy, too tempting. Just this low voice in the background. Maybe it's time to stop. Maybe it's time to let go. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in a fight for attention, not for myself, but for my country, for the people still suffering here. There's so much happening in the world, so much pain everywhere, and here I am trying to make sure no one forgets Ukraine. And yes, it matters. It's my duty as a human, as a Ukrainian, but sometimes I also wonder if I'm stealing space from other stories that also deserve to be heard. Explaining why Ukraine matters is so obvious after all. We all know what's at stake. We all know what Russia is, what it does. The images are everywhere, but I don't feel comfortable to compete for empathy. I don't want to fight for attention. I don't want to take anything away from any other war, any other grief. What if I just don't come back? What if this journal just ends? Would anyone notice? Would it even matter to someone? But then something hit me. I remembered that my feelings here are not only mine, These feelings, this pain, this fire, they just don't belong only to me anymore. Because when I'm living and sharing my experience of the war, I'm connecting with so many of you. It's easy to think we're only fighting for life in Ukraine, but the reality is that life is a battle everywhere. And sometimes your personal Russia doesn't make the news, but it's just as devastating. And still, you never gave up your battles, your personal Russias, so how could I? I don't have that right. Russia is not just a country, it's a concept. It's the force that tries to erase you, that tells you to stop fighting, that whispers you don't belong, that the world is better without you. And Ukraine? Well, Ukraine is a concept too, but a very different one. Ukraine is a concept of you, of who you are when you decide to resist. The part of you that refuses to disappear, the part that holds the line when everything else is falling apart. You don't give up when you receive the notice that you have cancer. You don't surrender when your doctor says your spouse has Alzheimer's. You resist. You go on. And yes, you certainly think so many times about giving up, but you just don't. You don't. Because resisting is the greatest act of love we can have for ourselves and for the world around us. That's why I will not surrender to Russia. I won't. Not because resisting is easy, but because you show me every single day that surrender is not an option. Well, maybe it's still an option on the table waiting, but it's also one that forgets the miracle of being alive. The miracle we carry just by waking up, just by breathing, just by going on. Because that's what life is, my friends. Life should be called resistance. And like you, I love this miracle too much to give it up. That's why what I write here could never be considered news. It's what's left of me, and perhaps it's what's left of you too. A space where we still attempt to be human together. At some point, I realized that my value isn't about sharing information. Value is honesty. It's what happens when someone dares to speak without armor, when the voice isn't polished but real, when the writing doesn't explain but reaches. Every time I sit down and speak from the place that still hurts, you write back. You tell me that you cried. That you held your grandchildren a little longer that day. That my words helped you feel something you were afraid you'd lost. That's when I know I made the right choice. Because I'm not here to explain Ukraine. I'm here to remind you that you're still human. This is not a project. This is not a performance. This is a shelter for every person who still wants to believe that good exists. For every soul who still thinks hope is worth the risk. For everyone who looks at the headlines and whispers, this can't be who we are. You're right, it's not. And if my voice does anything at all, I hope it gives you permission. Permission to feel, to cry, to stay soft. To remember that kindness isn't weakness, that love is not naive, that feeling deeply is not something to hide, but the only way to survive. And if you feel something, anything when you read me, I hope with all my soul that you found your way back to the best part of yourself too. Because that's how you make me feel every time you write back. and maybe that's enough. They say Putin is launching his summer offensive, that's June 24th, 2025, that he's trying to break our morale, that he wants a map with just enough red ink to call it a victory. They're not wrong, but what they still don't understand, and I don't know how to make them, is that we don't live by the map anymore. We live in what's left. Like it's a new chapter in some long and fascinating report. The news says we're bracing for collapse, that we might not hold, and maybe we won't, maybe we will, but I can't think in maps anymore. All I know is the sky hasn't been quiet in days, and the ground doesn't even shake anymore when it's hit. It just swallows. Places like Kostantinica aren't a headline to me. It's not a logistics hub. It's a woman who used to sell flowers near the station, a boy who learned to ride his bike down cracked sidewalks, families that still boil potatoes while drones crack the air above them. The world reads about the town like it's already gone, but we're still here. We wake up, we walk, we hold our breath through the silence between sirens. And it's not strategy, it's not resilience, it's just what we do now. We keep existing. Even when nobody's watching, even when they say we shouldn't be able to, they say Russia is advancing from three sides, that they've brought new weapons, new drones, new tactics, learned from their, quote, mistakes. And I want to ask, have they learned how to feel yet? Because that's what this war is, not just power, not just tech. It's the weight of still being human when everything around you tells you not to be. I don't care how many kilometers they take. I care about the young soldier who held his position for 50 hours without sleep, about the nurse who still talks to the injured so they don't die alone, about the father who sends his daughter a voice message every morning before the signal cuts out again. They want to break our morale. They should have done it in the first month. Because what's left now, what's left after all the grief and ruin and numbness isn't morale. It's the decision to keep going, even when hope feels stupid, even when you're too tired to cry, but you show up anyway. We're not waiting for a miracle. We're not chasing glory. We just want to survive with enough of ourselves intact to say, I was there. I stayed human. I didn't disappear. I've asked Ron to read the last few pages, and you want to say the date too?
Have a seat.
I will. Oh, okay. Thanks.
June 27th. June 27th. I've been meaning to write this for a long time. A full article saying thanks again to you, my reader, but also to Substack, to explain what Substack has given me, not as a writer, but as a person surviving something unspeakable. And I kept thinking, I'll do it next week. I'll do it when I feel stronger. I'll do it when there's more peace in me than rubble. But there's no such week here, so I'm not going to wait. In a war, tomorrow or next week are never guaranteed. And in a world of platforms and policies, even voices like mine can disappear in a heartbeat. So I need to write it now, before I no longer can. But first, let me tell a little how everything started. I didn't come to Substack with a plan. I came with a pulse that was fading after too many nights of fear, and a voice that didn't know where to go anymore. I looked outside and saw a war that wouldn't stop. Inside, a soul so crushed that needed to do something urgent to restore the strength to carry on. And so I started to write. I didn't start writing because I thought anyone would read me, but because I felt that I had to. Because the war demanded me to do something that I had never done before. I never thought seriously about being a writer, but I always dreamed about something that spreads humanity and kindness. To collect reasons to believe the world still has reasons to exist. And when I read the words I was writing, I saw a world that I was not even recognizing myself. I didn't realize I was capable of writing. For example, about love, especially in moments when my heart was completely full of anger, of rage, of desperation. And I realized that I needed to share these words with the world because desperation made me write things that I never took for granted that I would write someday. Probably because I was not writing from myself, from my standpoint. I was writing from the standpoint of Ukraine, from the standpoint of a human being in any part of the world. Before here, I wrote for a whole year only in a tiny blog on Buy Me a Coffee, where I poured my words, but only a handful of people would ever stumble upon it. And I also tried Twitter, where, well, no comments are needed. A friend from the U.S. told me about Here, a strange and interesting space for writers called Substack, where, of course, I would never be read by many people because the most incredible writers in the world are here, for sure. But at least I would feel inspired by them. And I had the hopes of getting a little more readers than my 20 or 30 wonderful friends who were reading me before I came here to this platform. No one likes chasing likes. No algorithm playing God, just words and people and something fragile in between. So I started writing like no one would ever see it for 3 years. And that's when you showed up. You read. You stayed. You reached out. You didn't scroll past. You told me, I see you. You made me feel like I wasn't shouting into the ruins anymore. And in a world so loud, so complex, so saturated like this one, that's the most unexpected miracle of all. That's what Substack gave me. Not just a platform or a better interface. It gave me the miracle of being heard. And you, my reader, my friend, you gave me a reason to get up and write again, even when the sirens have kept me awake all night. You made this more than a page. You made it a place where a country under invasion could be felt, not just read. Sometimes I think you don't realize what you've done. You gave me a shelter without ever asking for anything back. You gave me a future simply by caring. Much more than the kind of subscription you opt for having, not even if you are subscribed. Every time I read your comments, I feel more motivated and with a sense that the world still has a way to thrive, that the world does not reduce itself to Putin, Trump, missiles, and destruction. The world is still a beautiful place to be, with beautiful people to connect. So thank you. Thank you, Substack. Thank you, reader. Thank you, life, for giving me one more day to say what must be said and someone to hear it.
Just one more thing. I read a post last night, actually, hopeful, that war made me find God. And with that, I'll end. Thank you.
Any comments or questions for Jackie?
What's scary is that we think it can't happen here. There are politicians in office now who would gladly handle things their way, like they did, just to be in power.
Jackie, I had a little advance notice of what you were talking about, and as you were talking to me, you were emotional. Your presentation has been remarkable. I'm sitting next to a young man who I know, and he said, I don't think I can stay to the end. And I said, you better stay to the end. And he has, and I just can't say enough about this presentation. More people ought to hear that, and anybody who makes an excuse because they can't come and listen to this ought to be ashamed of themselves. I very much appreciate what you have given to all of us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say your loving compassion is an inspiration. And thank you so much for shining a light on this very human experience that we all need to be holding in our hearts and doing what we can to bring an end to it.
This obviously hits very much to home to you. I was wondering, do you have some kind of a personal family connection to that part of the world, to Ukraine, to Russia, to the whole area that has been so mangled over the years, through our 18th century, 19th century history into the 20th century?
Well, my mother's parents are from Ukraine. Before it was called Ukraine. I think at that point it was called White Russia. But the other part of it is just reading this, I can't let it go. And he continues to write. I think at the beginning, we had his name. It's Viktor Kravchuk. And he is on Substack. So if you, go to Substack and search, you will find his posts. And he writes every week, regardless of what's going on.